evening, good evening, good evening. Welcome to Friday Night Rambles, or good afternoon, because we've gone international. This is big, episode 10. And I'm going to start by saying, if you hear a crack, please don't hurt me. I've got my The Show Must Go On t-shirt supporting the Acting for Others charity, which is the charity. So those in America, you will know the Actors Fund. Well, the Acting for Others charity is our equivalent of the Actors Fund. It helps a load of theatre charities in the UK. And 16 different shows are on this t-shirt. If you can guess which 16 are, you win 10 brownie points. It's brilliant. Right, episode 10, we've gone international because we've got two-time Tony nominee. I'm surprised he hasn't won a Tony, by the way, but that's debatable to people, but I think he should have won. Alex Brightman. Hello, Alex Brightman.
Hello from across the pond. Met the many ponds that we don't share, but it's nice to see you.
How are you doing? Welcome to Friday Night Rambles.
I'm great. It's so nice to be in the nighttime. You're in the future. I don't know what happens yet today, so I'm curious to know if anything good happens, if anything bad happens. I'm just living in the past.
Well, you'll soon find out. So, how have you been doing anyway? Because it's been an interesting couple of months.
Has it? Yeah, I think it has. It's been certainly not ideal for a lot of different people, but I'm doing okay. I'm learning to live with the idea that I don't have a night job anymore, and I've had one for the last 10 years. So it's been a little bit of a shift, but I thankfully have projects that I work on that have nothing to do with what I look like, just the writing and the sort of the typing and voiceover stuff. And so I've been keeping busy, which is nice. And I've also been reading up a lot and sort of becoming a little more worldly as it comes to news and sort of the awful things that are happening around the world. But for all intents and purposes, I'm doing okay.
Good. And speaking of news, because obviously the news is very much, it's on our phones now.
Yes. And
you can't help but notice it. So I guess that's also a big player in everything that's been going on as well.
Yeah, no, that's the one great thing about most of my life was that I didn't grow up with a phone in my hand. I didn't grow up with social media on me. So I had to learn it. I just early on, but still enough that it's not ingrained in my system. So I still feel like I have come to it. It wasn't like on me when I was born. So I do sympathize with sort of a more younger generation who feels constantly the need and that pull of their phone to check all the time.
Because you've just done a piece, I saw on your Twitter this morning, you've just done a piece, an interview about the influence of social media. And I was reading it and I found that quite interesting.
Yeah. I mean, I've been pretty vocal about the idea of like, letting art be the thing it is, which is like, I think it's a miracle that theater happens. And even though it's 8 times a week, it is 8 completely different shows because it has to be, because it's live. We cannot replicate the thing we did the night before, even though it sounds and looks something like it. It's not. Different people, different things. So I always think it is fun to leave it at just that. I completely understand the things and the need for pro shot footage and shows being on demand. But when they're not, I don't think necessarily the appropriate response is, well, it should be. So, we're still working those kinks out, and it's not all that easy to make all those things happen for everybody. But I agree. I think theater should be seen by all. I just think when you're in a theater, it should be seen as it's supposed to be seen.
Yeah, and I think it's been brilliant in the sense that obviously there's been a lot of shows that have gone online or have gone. Let's drop the big elephant in the room, Hamilton. That's online. I'm going to confess, I'm about 3/4 of the way. It's been up for like 3 weeks now. I'm 3/4 of the way through it. Still haven't watched the final bit, but I just find it so hard to engage in the sense that I'm not watching the theatre version, I'm watching the recorded theatre version. But then again, I absolutely love the original production of Rent. So
sure. And what I say, I think in the article is said pretty, I think astutely, or at least it was the person who wrote it, Yuna, who made me sound a lot better than I probably sounded, was that it's just going to be different if it's not live. Theater is inherently live. And so the idea is like, it is the thing. So you don't have the luxury of going to grab your groceries from Fresh Direct if they come in the middle of your show, whereas you're watching Hamilton. What's nice is that you can sort of watch it a la carte. That's a lovely thing to be able to do, especially if you don't live somewhere that has theater. But, it's a give and a take.
Right. So very quickly, if you have questions, we're going to do questions towards the end. We'll get all the sort of stuff out the way. We'll have a couple of games, and then if anybody's got any questions, feel free to put them in. I've got eyes and ears watching for any good questions. So that's that. Right. Let's start at the beginning. So, how did you get into the business of show?
I certainly was not strong-armed into it. I know I've talked to a lot of people recently that are like, my parents think I should do it. And I was like, wow, times have changed for parents, because when I was younger, it was like risky, and the idea of like a career in the arts wasn't infinite, and it still isn't. I just think that kids now have like much more supportive parents than I remember seeing. Thankfully, my parents were kind of in the middle. They were like, we saw a show. I saw a show in New York City at the Winter Garden Theater, which I think is a pretty important detail. And I told my parents when I got home to California, I want to do whatever that was. I just really enjoyed everything about that. And so we did some quick research and found a community theater where I auditioned, and everybody who auditioned got in, which I think is also an important detail for how I have grown up in theater, and started doing shows from the age of 8.5, 9. And I never stopped from this moment right now talking to you. Like, theater has been a thing I have done for that long. Mm-hmm. And I have never stopped liking it because of that notion that it is communal. It's community. It's the reason I go back and back, and every time I keep coming back to it, having done writing and voiceover and film and television, is because I miss seeing my friends. I get to go see my friends every day and hang out and do something miraculous with them. Yeah. So that's what I miss the most, and that's why I do it.
And so then we sort of go through the years, and then you land your first Broadway show. Now, that's an interesting story in itself. So those who don't know, what show was it and what happened?
It was a smash hit called Glory Days. And it was, and actually, it's funny. It was a smash hit in Washington, D.C., where it premiered. And it got rave reviews. Two young guys wrote it, Nick Blameyer and James Gardner. And it was supposed to be like the second coming of like musical theater. And like they brought it quickly to Broadway because what were they supposed to do? They were being told this was the next great thing. So very hard for two young minds to not think that people are right. They brought it to Broadway. I was cast as a swing for 2 of the 4 leads. We did a couple, I think 2 weeks of previews, if that, and then we opened and we had an open night party, and the next day we were closed. we had a meeting at the theater that said we had closed, and we had already closed. The meeting was secondary. So it was a weird, very out of body experience to hit that thing that you really wanted to do, and then it's not there anymore. And that's how it works. It's not that you don't get a consolation prize. It's just the show's over, pick up your stuff. You're not in this theater anymore. This theater is no longer your home anymore. They're all temporary anyway, but it's very interesting. And it was it was too fast to be heartbreaking, if I'm being honest. So what was cool about it was in the next 5-6 months, I auditioned my ass off and ended up getting the ultimate consolation prize, which was being in Wicked for 2 years.
And that is a massive show. I mean, I've got it on here.
Yeah.
There. Yeah. And obviously, worldwide brand, smash hit. At that point, how long had Wicked been open when you joined?
It was still white hot. It was like 2004 it opened, and I joined the show in 2008. So it was still this like huge, huge show. And every time walking out on stage was like walking out to like Woodstock or like Live Aid. It was like this like crazy big, response. And I'm sure it still is. I just haven't seen it in years. It was massive. I mean, it was this thing. It so quickly went from being a show to being a thing, like this phenomenon, that you did feel, sort of this pride and also job security of having that job, because you're like, well, this show's never going to close. And I just came from a show that closed in one night. So it was a nice comfort level to know, okay, I'm going to keep this job for at least a little bit longer than the one I just had.
Yeah. It's one of those shows that it's just a beast in itself. And I know you've described that quite documentally before. And so how long were you with the show for?
2 years.
2 years. That's a long time to be with the show.
It's a long time to do anything consistently. It's a long time to do anything. And I found in doing those 2 years that I am not really built for that necessarily. with depending on the show. It got, by year 2, I started to be like, wow, I need to do something else. Like I felt compelled to, even if it wasn't a Broadway show, just something else. I just needed it. Like my soul was craving it. I had and again, I can only wish that any actor watching this has the luxury to have that feeling that like, oh, I got to get out of this massively successful 2-year run of a show that I'm doing. I hope everybody has that, but I did get to that point of like, I need to do something else.
And that brings up the interesting question of when do you realize that? Because I've been speaking to different people throughout this series that said that like some of them have been in long running shows, some of them have hated doing more than a year contract, some of them know castmates that have been in shows for 5 years.
Yeah. So
when do you know it's right to move on from something?
I think it's probably different for everybody. The feeling I had was I started to I guess for lack of a better term, I started to resent certain things about the job, which is just so the wrong feeling to have about a dream job, is the idea of like, there were certain people that I would find not doing their part enough, and I shouldn't be worried about them. But then again, I need to share the stage with these people. So when I started seeing people just sort of floating through the show and not loving it night after night after night, I came to this realization that was twofold. One, that's a thing that's going to happen. People are going to just treat this as a job, and fine, as long as you acknowledge it. But two, I'm not going to be able to change them. So it's just going to make me feel worse and worse if I just continue to like look at them and go, they're not doing as good a job as I know they can be doing. And it wasn't up to my criteria. It was just that I know that you've done a better job than this. So why are you not treating this audience like the other ones? So I started to have those feelings. And by the time I got to the second year, I was like, I just need to find a new home. I need to find a new landscape. I need to find a new thing, because I'm afraid that I was going to fall out of love with theater in general if I kept letting it do that to me.
And I guess as well, because when you're feeding off someone, you're feeding off their energy, you're feeding off their delivery, and you're feeding off. So you can only take what you get out of everything around you. So I guess that really affects your quality as well.
Big time. Well, acting, I mean, this is the cliche is true. Acting is reacting. We never act alone. Even if we're on stage doing a monologue is something that is hugely misnomered. It's like a monologue is not just you spouting off information. It's a conversation that we're only hearing one part of. So a scene can sometimes feel like a monologue. Sometimes you're trying and the person there is just like having their grocery list running in their head, and you feel it. And then the audience feels it. I mean, the audience will go, it was a great show, but really somewhere deep in your heart, you're like, something was not there. I feel like audiences are smart enough to understand that. And they might have liked the show in general, but something's off and you can feel it.
Yeah. And again, before we move off from Wicked, you had some very big names, big names in theatre now, even when you were there. Yeah. I mean, two that come to mind, Kerry Ellis, Queen of Musical Theatre in London.
Yes,
She's like the West End First Lady. And Aaron Tveit.
Yes, the other First Lady of musical theatre. I love Aaron. Aaron actually, I'll get to Kerry Ellis in a sec. Kerry Ellis and I didn't have too much of it. We crossed over. So I was there for her last like week and a half, 2 weeks. Which I was able to be on stage with her. And it's, all the rumors are true. She's amazing. She really is like a tidal wave of a person. And was very nice to me in the little time we had. Aaron, is just like this, Adonis, gorgeous, like physically just, impossible human being, and vocally ridiculous. So I was, I fell into the trap of going, he's probably a jerk. Like I was like, he's probably going to be this guy. Like, who am I? I'm this like 3 foot nothing, person in the show. And we had mutual friends before I joined the show. And when I joined the show, he was the first person. He came up to me, made me feel at home, and gave me a congratulations on making your actual Broadway debut gift. Because I didn't really get to grace the stage in Glory Days. So he was, everything I had heard about him was wrong. And he was an excellent, and obviously he's been in so many things since then, on and off screen and on stage. But every time I've ever hung out with him, texted him, whatever, it's always been good. And he's just genuinely so consistently talented.
Yeah. Again, I guess anybody who's watching over in the UK, big difference there I've just noticed is all the actors go in individually, as opposed to over here where you get a year contract,
right,
with the same cast. all the way through unless you drop out for whatever reason.
Sure.
So I'm guessing it's like passing ships all the time with people coming in and out of Broadway shows. So you then move on from Wicked. What happens next?
I take this really amazing, refreshing kind of year off, year off of like New York. I wanted to get out. I wanted to visit my family in California. So I decided to sort of make it a working vacation. I sort of did shows about in different places and states and stuff. And I did shows in California, in Utah. I did the Utah premiere of Next to Normal, where I just got to know the regional circuit. I'd never done that before. My career started so early professionally that I only got to know really LA and New York. So I wanted to like see other places and perform in front of audiences that were different than the ones that I had known. So I did that whole year, and I was doing a show in Philadelphia called Stars of David, which was about Jewish like figures of note. And during that rehearsal process and run, I was busing back and forth to New York City to audition for Big Fish, which was this project that had been workshopped for many years. I had heard about and had pretty consistently the same cast, and made slight changes here and there. But they were looking for an understudy for Bobby Steggert, who plays the son Will, and to someone to also be in the ensemble. So I came in, kept coming back in and forth, and it worked out very well. I ended up finding out during the run of that show that I was going to be joining the out-of-town tryout for that show. And so then we did that and came to Broadway.
And then
didn't laugh.
And then again, going into another big smash hit, Matilda.
Yeah.
Again, that was the first show I saw in the West End, and it is
amazing show.
Something completely different. So, what was your experience like? So, were you replacement cast, original cast in that?
I was the first replacement for Taylor Trench, who plays Michael, who screams about Telly and is sort of the monosyllabic brother who doesn't speak that much. But also that track also plays like the redheaded bully and is all over that ensemble track. So it was my first crack at something where I never stopped moving throughout the show. From the minute the show started to the end, we were just constantly in motion.
And again, it's one of those shows where it's sort of, again, it's a bit similar to School of Rock. The kids are the vehicle for the show.
Yeah. And if they're not highlighted in the right way, the show suffers. If the adults try and sort of steal it from them, it doesn't look good. The best part about a show like that in School of Rock is if you push the kids forward, you in turn look good because they are the stars of the show. They just need a lot of support because they don't have the experience, just age-wise. Some of them are well beyond their years, but like to encourage them to be center stage and spotlit rather than you trying to make the scenes about yourself, you inevitably make the show in general better. Yeah.
And some of those big numbers, I mean, Revolting Children, in the way, again, it's going back to the saying about Wicked, Beast in itself.
Yeah.
It's one of those shows, again, where it's so cleverly written.
Yes, I think I truly, and like this, I don't like to sort of say things are better than or worse than, but when I remember when I was in callbacks for Matilda and I got to see it for the first time, I had a ticket to the show to see the thing I was having a final callback for, which is, sort of like unfair because what if you don't get it? You're like, now I got to see it. Now I'm not in it. But I got to see it. And I remember sitting there without any sort of real bias because I wasn't in the show yet, watching this show going, wait, what won over this? What was the show? And I couldn't figure it out until it was Kinky Boots that swept that year. And I was like, wow, I feel like this score is one of the best scores I had heard in a decade. Just the cleverness alone, forgetting the music, the cleverness of the lyrics in that score, I think are outmatched, unmatched.
Yeah, it's incredible. So what was it like then learning Roald Dahl, absolute legend over here in terms of children's novels? Yeah. I don't know what it's like in the States.
Oh, big time.
Singing something as incredible as Tim Minchin's stuff.
Well, I was a fan of Tim Minchin as a stand-up. I was a fan of Tim Minchin in his one-man sort of get-ups and the piano shows that he did. I've known about them since I was a kid. I was a huge stand-up comedy fan and still am. So I knew Tim Minchin in only one arena, which was like, he's a stand-up. He is a comedian, that's all. And watching how well that translated, his songwriting in general translated to something as clever and as alphabet adjacent as Matilda, was just awesome. And he also is one of those composers that didn't just write his show and then leave. He came back all the time. When Tim came into town, it was always such a great time because he would come in, treat the cast, do this amazing post-show stuff, so much fun to hang out with. He's just like any other composer that's up and coming. He just wants his show to be good, which made it good. His passion for it to be good is what was good. He didn't rest on the idea that he had fans.
Yeah. So then we have this little show called School of Rock that sort of snuck up behind.
That's right.
So how did School of Rock come into your life? Was this at the same time as Matilda was happening?
When Matilda was happening, I did a very small reading of the very first script of School of Rock. It had very few songs ready to go. It was just sort of the adapted script. And they brought together a couple people that the casting director had deemed, some of her favorites to come and elevate some material. So it was a lot of that, a lot of adults around a table, basically playing every part. No kids, no instruments, no nothing just yet, just the script. And we heard some tracks that Andrew Lloyd Webber played, sort of rough scratch tracks of what the songs were becoming. And the show, needed, like any show at that point, it needed a ton of help. It needed a ton of work. But where? And so we found quickly that the script just sort of needed to be, one, Americanized, because Julian Fellows just didn't have all the capacity of he would call a parking lot a car park. Right. And, so it's he needed us to sort of come in and go, actually, it's parking lot, even just small things like that. But then just the American version of a comedy is different than a British version of a comedy. I think just innately there are two different sort of styles. So it was up to us to come in and do that. And I had a very small part in the reading. I played Lawrence on keyboards, and I, played various ensemble members. But the director ended up taking a shine to me. Lawrence would always ask me about things I was writing and, sketches that I was writing and comedy I would be doing. And we just had a dialogue that he kind of enjoyed me as a presence. And he called me in to sort of start learning Dewey material, even though I was completely wrong for the role. Then I look much more like the role now than I ever did. And by my final callback, I was in the room and Lawrence asked me to improvise essentially for, 15 minutes. And that, I think, is what ended up winning me the role, was that I was able to sort of just make a world up in front of everyone's eyes using very little material. So the fact that, yes, I could be funny, yeah, I could play guitar, yeah, I could sing rock and roll, but if this script needed all this work and needed someone to bring it along, what they were also hiring was an improviser and a writer. And so that's what they got extra, on top of this. They got somebody with a ton of ideas every day, which I think, to their credit, I'm really happy for many reasons they cast me, but I'm happy because I think the show benefited from me being there to ask the questions and to elevate and to encourage.
So how much influence did you end up having over the script itself? How much of sort of your stuff got put in?
I wrote the whole show. No, no. I mean, I think by virtue of improvising, we accepted the idea, and not only I loved, I'm precious as much as I can be, I guess, about the stuff that I come up with. But when you're creating something, you have to just lose it. You have to become not precious at all about the things you're doing, things you love, things you hate. And so we would improvise a lot during the day, and then we'd come back the next day and we'd have a fresh set of script pages that some of them looked really familiar from the improvisations we were doing. And so we tried them as a script. And that's how the process ended up happening. We'd make stuff up. They would end up in script form. We would try them out. We'd find some sort of amalgamation of the two. And little by little, we created what was the musical adaptation of School of Rock, which I think looks a lot different than the movie now. The difference is between the kids being more of the highlight of the show, which was another big discovery, and not the Dewey Finn character. He was sort of the Pied Piper of it all, but really the kids were the thing you were focusing on. And I think that was really hit home. And we wouldn't have found that out if we didn't do all this playing around.
And again, the process for getting it up to Broadway was very different to, let's say every process is different, but your bog standard out of town tryout, then going to Broadway. So how was the process for that? Talk a little bit about that.
It was so quick. From inception, I mean, they had the idea years before, but from inception, really, truly, from having a script to going to Broadway was a year, which is unheard of. I mean, it's unheard of unless you are your own production company. And Andrew Lloyd Webber is, he makes the decisions. And if he wants a show to go to Broadway, it goes. And that's the beauty of being Andrew Lloyd Webber. I mean, he's built up this incredible thing that if he has an idea, it can get realized. So it was really quick. So doing the out of town tryout, which was in town, we did the secret sort of 10 performance tickets released on that day, only 150 tickets a piece type thing. And it got us a lot of information about what crowds really liked, what they didn't. And we got fast feedback, and we'd have to pivot. And between the workshop and Broadway was, I don't know, so little time, but they did so much work between then and then that all we had to do is just sort of keep honoring the tone of the thing we created. And the more we did that, the better the show got. But we had very little time to do it.
Because I remember seeing the videos that Broadway.com did of the recordings.
The small performance, yeah.
Yeah, and I remember going, this is when I remember seeing you and going, who's he? And then when obviously Tony's stuff coming through,
who is he?
Everyone's going, right, who's Alex Brightman? So that's where I guess everyone started paying more attention to you. So going through that process of opening a brand new show as a lead, going to the whole Tony process, what was that like? How did that fit? Was there pressure on your back?
Yes, inevitably, yes. What's funny is that School of Rock was my 5th Broadway show. And so I read all these articles that was like, School of Rock cast Broadway newcomer Alex Brightman, because that's how people want to think of things. You do. I did over half a decade of shows, and then all of a sudden I'm a newcomer again. So I've been discovered all of a sudden, which was its own weirdness. But yes, from that moment forward, nothing was the same in my career or my life. Because more people instantly across town knew who I was. The day it was announced that I was playing it, I was in all 50 states' newspapers in the United States. All of them. All 50 states had a story about me playing this role. So think about that. I mean, it's like the day before that, very few people know who you are. The day after that, a lot more people do. And it only got more than that as the days went on. So it was really trippy. It was a very Twilight Zone sort of situation where within weeks, you'd walk down the street in New York and someone would go, "You're the guy from that thing, right?" And you have to deal with that. So that was already weird. The Tony process, I have a very interesting view of that because I was in the Hamilton season. So what we knew going in was, okay, great, we're not going to win. Like we kind of knew that. So it did take the pressure off of the sort of campaigning of it all. I just had a really good time because I got to like rub shoulders with these people that I idolize. Hang out with Lynn and Leslie and David and Cynthia Erivo and like all these, and Danielle Brooks and all these incredible people that I watch in awe of. And to be able to be a part of that is awesome. So forget the campaigning. It was just really fun. The one thing I will say is that when you are nominated for a Tony, it's awesome. However, after that, everybody is then seeing you for the next couple months at your most tired and your worst. Because you spend the rest of your days doing these events and interviews and this, which is all great. But the downside of it is that when you get to your show that night, you've already done 12 shows that day. So it is this like rigorous process for anybody who doesn't know. It's like when you are nominated, it's amazing, but it does have its drawbacks on your performance for sure.
And the thing about your season as well with School of Rock is obviously Hamilton was there, Waitress.
That's right.
Color Purple.
Yeah, amazing.
Even the one that closed really early, I've forgotten its name. Chuck Everlasting.
Oh yeah, amazing show. Beautiful score.
Like those shows, any other season would be at the forefront of the season,
big time.
But I think that's a credit to where theatre was in 2006. It was. 2016, sorry, was at literally like the most incredible. I still think it's nothing like it since.
I agree. It was an amazing season. I mean, it truly was this like really eclectic, interesting season that I do. But I mean, the good news was nobody on Broadway felt any differently than I did, which was like Hamilton's the thing. We're happily taking that, like, will be all the other shows. Like we were very comfortable with that. I was at least. I was like very happy to sort of watch this incredible person, incredible company of people, meaning Hamilton, do the thing everyone thought they were going to do and do it well. And then we were happy to do our thing really well too. So
Yeah.
it was like a nice little symbiotic relationship of being able to cheer each other on.
Yeah. Okay, but let's face it, you lost the Tony. So we're going to play a game. And this game, a bit of a hint to what we might be talking about in a future, in a little bit. It's called Say My Name.
Uh-huh.
And basically what the game is I've got clues to 9 either actors, actresses, or musicals
Okay.
who have lost the Tony.
Yeah.
So and then you're going to guess
Okay.
what it is. Okay.
I'm happy to. I'm more than happy to. I like games because I hit a point in my life really early on that I realized that games don't matter. So I just have a really good time playing them. I don't feel pressured to be right.
Yeah. Well, I don't give out prizes, so it's all or nothing. That's what I say.
All right,
So
fine with me.
play along if you want at home. This is the first clue. The first question is the original production of the now longest running American musical.
American musical.
Yeah. So it's not Phantom.
Oh, I know that. Is it a chorus line? Is it Chicago?
It's Chicago.
Yeah, okay, it's Chicago.
So
okay.
Chicago, it did, the original production didn't win. So this isn't taking into account any revivals
I see.
or anything
Yes.
like that. So I should have said that as a disclaimer.
No, that's all right.
Next one. Actor, so he's a 6-time. The actor is 6-time nominee, including musicals Fiddler, Follies, Cabaret, and South Pacific. Was it season before? Was it season after or season?
No, it's the season I was in. It was. I think Fiddler was this. Yeah, because I was nominated with him. It was Danny Burstein. Yeah,
Danny Burstein.
And you spelled his name wrong.
Have I actually?
Yeah, there's no N. It's Burstein. No It's not Bernstein. It's Burstein.
Brilliant.
Yep.
I will edit that right now.
He's a good
There
guy.
we are.
Great guy.
There we are.
Excellent
Please don't
dude.
come for me, Danny.
Incredible family.
Brilliant.
One of the best dudes.
Right, famous British actress nominated 3 times, but turned down her 3rd nomination in 1996.
Oh boy. I'm just gonna throw a name. Elaine Page.
Nope.
Okay, who is it?
It's Julie Andrews.
Okay, great. It's
Because
Julie.
you turned down Victor and Victoria.
Oh, okay. That's a history. That's an avenue of history that I need to know more about.
Yeah, so apparently it was to do with when I was doing my research, to do with the fact that she felt the rest of her company were underlooked.
Interesting.
So she turned down the nomination.
I understand that sentiment completely. I love that. Carrie Butler.
Don't even need to say it. Right, this is an interesting one. You're going to get this straight away, but I find this interesting. Musical nominee in 1971 that was turned into a smash hit film starring John Travolta.
Musical that starred John Travolta is it Saturday Night Fever?
No, it's Grease.
Oh, it's Grease. Okay, I was like, you're right. I should have just went obvious with it. I was like, Saturday Night Fever wasn't a musical until much later, but maybe I figured it was. They had a. I don't know. I'm bad at this.
You're doing well. I'll give you that.
I feel great.
Voice of
Yeah, but he was. But here's the thing. This is the big problem with nominations, right? Because him and Andrew Rannells, Josh Gad was nominated with Andrew Rannells, and so many votes went split, and neither of them won.
But the complete opposite happened in London. Gavin Creel got the Olivier Award for Elder Price.
Oh, he did. Yes, he's the best.
Oh, I've got a story about Gavin Creel, which is interesting.
What a boring, terrible voice he has, isn't it?
No, apparently, so when he was in London, because we had the original standby for Elder Cunningham on a couple of weeks ago for London.
Who was it?
David O'Reilly.
Okay, cool.
So he stood by for Jared in London, and he was saying, lovely story about Gavin. Gavin was offered the number 1 dressing room in the Prince of Wales, but he turned it down.
It's a good guy.
So he and Jared were on 2 and 3, and then Alexia, who played Nega Belugi, moved down to number 1.
That's awesome. That's a nice gesture, and I think that's a thing that it really is about. I'm a big believer in like the hardest workers aren't necessarily the leads. So I get it. He's a nice dude.
Next one, 2-time Tony nominee, made a Broadway debut after winning You're the One That I Want.
Just talking about her the other day, Miss Osnes, Laura Osnes.
Laura Osnes, that's right. This
All
is
of
an
us
interesting one.
losers here. These are a bunch of losers right here.
This is an interesting one. The best musical nominee for 1988, mixing Much Loved Fairy Tale characters with the music of Sondheim.
This is one of those moments where I would watch this musical and go, what won over this musical after watching how clever it is? Into the Woods, right?
Yep. Do you want to know who won instead?
Yeah, what won instead?
Phantom.
Oh, well, I mean, there you go. What a season. Holy moly. Can you imagine being a part of that season? Jeez.
There are other musicals that are like that. I mean, like, there's one season that Dreamgirls and Joseph were nominated.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Year. And then something called Nine won instead.
Nine, yeah. That's a great musical too, though.
I've never heard of it. I need to listen to it.
Oh,
Last question. The composer and lyricist who won a Tony Award, but not for Best Score.
I'm trying to think. Wait, I'm trying to put that apart. Hang on. Composer and lyricist who has won a Tony Award, but not for Best Score is... I don't know.
Stephen Schwartz.
Stephen Schwartz without the R. I see you're not a great speller.
Oh, well, to be fair, I did type this at last minute.
That's Stephen Schwartz, by the way.
I did type this at last minute. Amy, you should have just been spell checking.
There it is.
There we are.
Stephen Schwartz.
So, contact. Oh, she's apologized. My producer's on the line. Bless it. It wasn't even your fault. I was just typing at last minute. Basically, Stephen Schwartz got nominated, won the Special Tony Award in 2015 for his contribution. It was, I forgot what the name of the award was. Someone will correct me. But Stephen Schwartz was nominated for about 4 or 5 musicals. For Best Score, didn't win.
He didn't win. So did Avenue Q take score?
Yeah.
Bobby Lopez got that one. Wow. Yeah, I knew they had won Best Musical, but I didn't realize they won Best Score. Wow.
But they didn't get Best Actress. Tina Menzel beat them on that.
I'm sure that, I'm sure he's crying all the way to his gazillion dollars that he has made over the, that guy is, he's responsible for some of the greatest musicals of our entire time here on Earth. So.
Yeah. Nuts, absolute nuts. I want to quickly go back to School of Rock because you left the November of 2016, but you came back in 2017. So what prompted you to come back?
Well, and I don't think he'd mind saying this because it's partly my fault because I created a role that was so crazy and essentially ill-advised to perform 8 times a week. Because I wanted to do such a good job and I wanted to do something that was so memorable that I ended up saying yes so many times in the rehearsal room when I maybe should have said no for things that were physically hard, vocally hard, and I could do them, but it really took a lot out of me. And so after a long time, that's really difficult to sustain. And so I could do it because I built the thing. But people started to come in and start to sort of ruin their voices pretty early on before they had a chance to really see how it fit for them. So I believe it was Eric Peterson who came in after me and just a comedian on his own right. One of the nicest, most snappy dressed dudes I've ever met in my life. And he came in and ended up, hurting his voice or, singing on the wrong vocal cord for a second and just needed a week or 2 off just to rehab his voice like I did. I did the same thing during my run. And so I was unemployed and I had nothing going on. And Lawrence, the director, called me. It was hours ahead in London. So I was dead asleep. Woke up at 5:30 in the morning and he says, "Hi, Alex, how are you?" I said, "I'm exhausted." He goes, "All right, I have a question for you and don't say no." is what he said. You're not allowed to say no. And so I heard, what was going on and I worked it out with my schedule and with all the representation being like, wow, are we doing this? You never get this chance. And so I went to go see the show the next night. And again, such a surreal experience to see the thing you created with somebody else's shoes on. And then the day after that, I was in rehearsals. And then 2 days after that, I was in the show for about 12 or 13 performances. And that was like being dropped into an ocean. That was like being dropped into an ocean and trying to swim and do musical theater at the same time because I didn't have enough time to meet everybody. So I tried to meet and make connections with the kids as much as possible, but a lot of them, if not all of them, had changed.
Because you went out with a lot of the original set of kids at that point. I remember seeing that final curtain call, and it was insane.
Oh, it was crazy.
The amount of kids that were leaving.
I think there were 11 of us that left on the same day. So it was a very, very deep hole that I'm sure was felt. But it was, what's amazing is how quickly they were able to fill all of them with incredible people, especially the young people. Like they were able to turn over like how many guitarists now in multiple companies, by the way. Like it's incredible. The amount of talent that's out there is ridiculous.
Insane. I'm still waiting for it to come on tour because it's supposed to be coming on tour next year around the UK.
Cool.
So I'm really looking forward to seeing it. Didn't get to see it before it closed.
All right,
Actually, the London.
I'll do it. I'll come see you.
Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. You should come up to the northeast of England. You'll absolutely love it.
I'm there.
Let's talk about Beetlejuice because obviously that is the most current thing that you've done. And so how did that enter your life?
Everything else entered my life slowly and meanderingly and like over the course of many years. Beetlejuice, I was sitting in my apartment. I got a phone call from my agent saying there's an audition tomorrow morning for this reading of this adaptation of Beetlejuice. They want to see you come in. Here are 10 pages of sides and songs. Do the best you can. It was like 8 at night. I memorized as much as I could. I read the scenes. I thought they were genuinely some of the funniest things I've ever read. And I stayed up another extra hour because of it. I was like, I need to memorize this. This is something that is going to be great. Came in. I did the best I could that morning. About 6 minutes in the room. Was me all the way through. Just, do you want to work with me? Here I am. I did not rest on the School of Rock laurels at all because I know that this is a business where we continually have to prove that we are good, no matter how much people say we are. I left that night. I got a phone call saying I was doing the reading, and from that moment until we closed, I was Beetlejuice for the next 4 years, or 3.5, whatever it was, 4 years currently, I guess. But I kept looking at it like an audition because I know that at any time during the process of workshops and anything we were doing, they could say, thank you, goodbye. There's nothing in my contract kept me from losing this, so I had it. I just never wanted to let it go. And so I kept being that person that I now teach other people to be in classes, which is inventive, encouraging, kind, punctual, improvisatory if need be, being quiet if you need to be, not always sharing your opinion, but so just being a nice collaborative performer helped me all the way through.
Yeah. And so when you, obviously the process different again to School of Rock, because you had your Washington out of town tryout. So getting from the reading to the workshop to the out of town tryout, how much actually changed? Because I know, again, this is something that I know has been documented a lot.
Yeah,
a lot's changed.
Yeah, lots changed, and especially over the course, even before DC. I mean, the original show I remember reading around a table or with some music stands back years and years back is not even the same show at all. There's not. I mean, some of the song. I mean, almost half the score is different. It's been through so many iterations. Eddie probably wrote 45 to 50 songs over the course of its time trying to be developed. And by the time I got to DC, we had a really good version of the show, but the show was really dirty, really, really filthy. And to the point where it was very hard for families to take their kids and for them to recommend it to others. So what we did between then and Broadway was sort of not change the show, but just lighten it into a way where people could see it, enjoy it, and then also recommend it, because that became the hard part. I liked it, but I don't know if my friends would. And so we had to just turn a couple of dials. And the way we did that was just very simply, just who are these characters? They're not dirty. They are just people. They're relatable. Beetlejuice especially. He went from really, really mean, conniving, frat boy sort of like energy to a very lonely, really wants to be liked, never been seen guy. And that's what helped. That big change of like, I just want you to like me was very helpful in getting people on board. But yeah, we had Beetlejuice Beetlejuice was far more written than School of Rock. The two guys that wrote Beetlejuice, every time they would come up with script stuff, it was brilliant. Anthony King and Scott Brown are just like, they are like machines when it comes to creating new content. So like, a lot goes to them. I helped certainly, but a percentage of a percentage compared to what they did.
Yeah. And again, it's one of those musicals that we didn't really hear, like for me over here, didn't really hear much about it until you hear the words Alex Brightman going to Broadway, Tony nomination. And it's sort of a musical that basically sort of exploded. Yeah. And you talk about Wicked and Matilda being like beasts and being like phenomenons. This musical Beetlejuice, you would say it's a phenomenon in a different way, going back to the idea of social media.
Yeah, big time. I think that we weren't a hit. I mean, we weren't. The real truth of the numbers was we were not a hit. If you looked at our numbers the first couple of months we were on Broadway, we were a struggling show that probably should have closed, which is crazy to think about it now. You know, the idea of like how much want there is for this show and how much this show is meant for some people and how successful it became. That in the beginning we were like, oh my God, all this work and we're not going to be here. And then social media, TikTok, us putting our show on the many other shows, the Today Show and the Thanksgiving Day Parade. Anytime we did a performance, it just grew exponentially. Everything started to work, and that snowball just the momentum it had after that was just nuts.
Yeah. And I'm going to bring something up here to do with TikTok, and I think it also relates to the fact that I think to me, looking on the outside in, you are someone that I think is not only such a kind actor, but a kind person in the sense that you nurture, like, obviously, Matilda, the kids.
Yeah.
School of Rock, you were obviously working a lot with the kids.
Yep.
But in Beetlejuice, you had Sophia and Presley, who are both, like, obviously young, upcoming performers. And I guess obviously Presley really helped with the TikTok stuff as well and the social media stuff. Because she knew what the young people were wanting. And I think, I guess, talk a little bit about your sort of outlook about working with these young actors.
So I'm glad you said young actors and not kids, because that's what I say. I say like they're young. I mean, some of them are more professional than I've ever been in my whole life. So when I say kid, I think kids, being a kid is a state of mind. I've met 55-year-olds that are kids. And so I think that it's just a young actor is the right term because they are young professionals for sure. It's fun to work with young actors who are in their process, because what they start to realize when they act with me, is that so am I. We're all in part of our process, and they can help me as much as I can help them. I have a little more experience just out of age, but when it comes to certain things about what's funny, what's going on, what's current, what do people like, I don't know that as well as this person. So I ignore that at my peril. You know, the idea of like trying to just go, this is how it's done, has never been a part of my work, never been a part of my work ethic to think that I know more than somebody. And that was never more true than in School of Rock. And so I carried that really, really deeply with me when I meet people that are just different, younger. I always think I definitely have something to learn from this person. I just don't know what it is yet. And finding it is like the best. And so the thing with Presley, which was amazing, was Presley, not only did she help, she was the one that generated this TikTok life for this show. And I don't think we'd be even close to where we were if people didn't find this show via that app. So I was more than happy to sort of like be a part of her world there and learn that like this is fun, it's whimsical, it only helps the views and the clicks, and we had a great time doing it. She's fantastic.
And you say about the numbers as well, because you went from, as you say, because I didn't realize you were struggling, because then I saw an article saying like 32 weeks consecutive, breaking the box office records at the Winter Gardens.
Yes.
Bearing in mind, Mamma Mia was there, Cats was there, School of Rock was there.
Right. We took all the records that we broke in School of Rock and we smashed those, which was like very heartening for me, because I was like, oh, that was nice to make a record and then break the record. That was very cool to figure out. Right. We're going to come back to Beetlejuice, because I know a lot of questions have arisen about Beetlejuice, and I'm conscious of time. We're going to play a game. It's my favorite game. It's everyone else's favorite game. It's Don't Hesitate. So for those who have never seen Friday Night Rambles before, Don't Hesitate is basically we give Alex a topic, a random topic, and he has to talk for 60 seconds without hesitating, whether it be an an a pause. This is literally like actor's hell. Yeah.
So let's have a look to see what you're going to get. Completely random. Ooh, what's it going to pick? I think you're going to get a subject called cheese.
In my life, there have been a couple
no. We've got to do this properly.
I'm sorry. Are we ready now?
We are ready. The intensity.
Tell me when to go. I'm ready now.
Okay. Alex Brightman, how do you feel about the subject cheese?
Cheese. In my life, there have been many moments where I have discovered things that I loved, not just liked, but loved. One of them is theater. The other one is comedy. The other one is stand-up comedy. And one of my favorite things on the planet is cheese. Here's the difference. Here's the similarities between cheese and theater. In theater, there is no cap to the learning. And in cheese, there is no end to the deliciousness. Cheese, just like acting, is juicy. It's nutty. It has flavors that you can't describe. You have to put it up your nose. You have to be cheese. You have to inhale cheese. There's a siren going by, but that's not going to even keep me from talking about one of my favorite things. My favorite cheese is Munster cheese. That was it. I so desperately wanted to keep going.
You got 43 seconds. That is the best score that we've had that's not been a 60-second, I think.
It's very difficult to not say when that's a huge part of my vocabulary.
I think you are on par with Matt Croak, who was our Aladdin in London.
All right. As long as I'm on par with Matt Croak, I'm good.
I think you are on par with Matt Croak. A lot of people obviously big fans of Beetlejuice in the comments. Obviously, in such a weird and wacky circumstance, that show closed.
Yeah.
What was your experience like with it? Because obviously, weren't you out on the last show?
I was out. So for the 3 days before Broadway shut down for good, I was out of the show with a vocal cord infection. I have a little tiny small infection on my vocal cords. They're common. You need to just rest. You can't do the show on them. So I took 3 days off. And I had heard something was going on in the world. I just didn't, it was as much as we all knew. So I was better on that third day. I was walking my dog in Central Park and I got a call from my manager saying, "You're not going to be going into the theater tonight." And I didn't put it together, figuring, I was like, what happened? Like, what's going on? What's going on with the Winter Garden? I had so many thoughts. And then right as that phone call happened, my phone, 65, 70, 100 text messages coming in with the same article that came out that everybody read, which was Broadway shut down indefinitely. So it was a shock, although I will say candidly, because I was still resting my voice, there was a part of me that didn't know/believe it was going to be a very long time. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. I get another night off. Like that. And that was my very first reaction was, oh, so I don't have to like rush home to get ready for a show. Great. And now I've been doing that for 6 months and I'm a little sick of it.
Wow. I'm going to start answering questions now.
Okay, let's do it.
Let's have, this is on the Facebook. Lauren says, have you adopted any mannerisms from playing any of the characters?
So something that has been in my life for a very long time is when I sing on a microphone, whatever hand's not singing is usually doing this thing. I just kind of end up going limp, like whether it's it feels like a jazz, whatever, or a rock thing. People call them raptor hands. And I just find this to be a very comfortable position. And so this creeped its way into Beetlejuice pretty heavily because I started noticing that when I do things with my arms, they would do this while I was talking as Beetlejuice. And it makes sense because he's been falling apart his whole life. So the whole idea that he wouldn't have like totally working limbs would make sense. So that's just part of my life that ended up like subtly creeping into the role and vice versa. And then every once in a while, I'll do the Beetlejuice voice because it comes out if I'm angry at a Starbucks and I didn't get the right order. And I'll be like, "Excuse me, I ordered this is supposed to be a vanilla latte, and this is a caramel latte." Oh, sorry. And then do that. So,
and speaking of the voice, because your way of doing the voice is completely different again from Will Blum, your cover. So, was the process of that from the direction? I'm guessing, just make it your own.
Yeah. That's it. I mean, before Will came on board, there was me. I can't remember who. I think it was just me at that point. There was not really, we weren't thinking about covers. So one of the things I was very aware of was that I wanted to make a role unlike Dewey Finn. I wanted to make a role that I could do really consistently, but that if I left the role, somebody else could pop right in. There was no learning curve other than whatever they brought to it. And so I wanted to do a voice because I like a challenge. And so I found a way to do it. But the good news is, obviously, you saw Will, or if you see Will, I got the pleasure of watching Abe do some of it too, that it doesn't rely on the voice. So the good news is, like, the whole show is not linked to a voice. It's any voice. It's any person. And so that was important. But yeah, my voice was a little very, very much distinct when it came to learning it. And it was a skill that had to sort of be honed.
Yeah. Here's a good question from the Facebook. We will get one from the YouTube. Hannah says, "Hey Alex, has the affected your life in both positive and negative ways?" That's quite an in-depth one.
I always appreciate when people want to just know negative things. What made you sad? Oh, okay. I don't know why that's important to you, but no, it's a great question. The way theater's affected my life positively is from the very beginning. It's been about friends. It's been about community, and it's literally. I don't say that because it sounds nice. I really enjoy doing shows with people I love. And so it doesn't feel like a job. It feels hard, but it doesn't feel like a job. So it affects my life because I think performing allows you to think creatively. And I would be nobody if I didn't have a creative brain. So I like that it gets tested and greased, on a daily basis. A negative is that you lose inevitably your schedule. I mean, I haven't, in the last 10 years, didn't get to go to this sounds like, a very privileged problem, but I didn't get to go to a Sunday brunch with bottomless mimosas because I had to do a show at 3 p.m. So like you do and that's a very, very funny, broad example of things like you do miss holidays. You perform on Thanksgiving. You only get like a day off for Christmas. So you don't get these breaks that people get. But the pros of the job are so amazing that a lot of the time I find it to be worth the sacrifice. So yes, negatives are there. And obviously the rejection is tough. Like I think rejection is part of this business, but you have to kind of develop a rhino skin to sort of make it through.
A lot of people are loving the comparison to cheese,
yes.
Which I very absolutely complex. Love.
Yes,
a lot
very
of people,
complex, very subjective, sometimes stinky.
I'm going to ask 2 more questions. The question that I've got to ask is, what was I going to say? Mishaps. We have to quickly talk about mishaps before we sort of finish up. But is there anything that happened within Beetlejuice in stuff mishaps-wise? But the one thing I really want to know is I really want to hear the Wicked mishap again.
Okay, I'm more than happy to do that. Beetlejuice, there's a story I've been telling recently, which I think is worth telling, which is that in the DC tryout, Lydia and Charles would come from the audience before Creepy Old Guy. They would enter the scene through the audience as if that's where the netherworld was. And so they'd have to do this massive quick change from Lydia's sort of black dress and Charles' sort of like dad costume into a red wedding dress and his tuxedo. So one night they walk up on stage and she's in this beautiful red dress, and Adam, who plays Charles, came up, Adam Danheiser, and his fly was down. And the white shirt was sticking out of his fly, and we kind of faced off. And while we were facing off, I slowly reached down and pulled his fly up during it. And so the audience caught that. And then him being an amazing comedian, he said his next line, and then he pulled his fly back down. So it became this kind of amazing moment that could have been a mishap, and it was a mishap. It just ended up becoming a really good thing because we had a bunch of trusted comedians on stage, knowing that this was, 1, not going to be an inside joke, but 2, we wanted, for the benefit of an audience, why not address the thing that's there?
And then the Wicked
you're breaking up right now. I can't. You're having like a crackly kind of voice thing. I want to make sure you know that.
It's happening on your end. So let me just sort myself out.
We both sound like robots.
Am I better now?
Yeah, you are.
Brilliant.
Am I better? Am I better?
You are. That's. I think I've solved the problem.
How's this?
I think I've solved the problem.
Okay.
That's much better. We've only got a couple more minutes anyway. So, the Wicked story. We have to talk about that. Was that?
I mean, it's well documented, and the story. I love that when I do these interviews, I'm have to tell a story that is so shameful and painful. I'm just kidding, but no, it happens to everybody in some way. You kind of just get used to the thing you're doing. So I was up in my dressing room thinking I had done all of what I had to do in Act 1, and I have a huge break before Act 2. So I was really just sort of letting it all go. I was chilling. I was in my just underwear and a t-shirt and a microphone. And I heard the cue over the PA system that we have all across the theater that sounded like the cue that I already thought I had done. And then I just remembered, like, I didn't do that scene yet. and I'm not dressed. And so I just literally, I shared the room with the guy that played Dr. Dillamond. I said, oh, I ran and I grabbed all the costumes off the costume rack, including his. I just need anything that could dress me. And I just started running because I had to run down 2 flights of stairs and then down and around a corner to the stage. So I already was not going to make it. And I was just putting everything on, like holding a pair of shoes in my hand and running and trying to make my mic, and people are getting out of my way. They're like, then the very helpful people in the building being like, you should be on stage. And you're like, thanks. I ran on stage with my Act 2 tunic wide open, total full view of a mic belt and my t-shirt, my black underwear, no pants, and black patent leather shoes and a red the Bach hat, the little yarmulke that he wears. And I had to pull it together and do a dramatic scene on stage while everyone around me was laughing. And added to the fact that I knew I was going to be fired. I was like, this is my last time on a Broadway stage. I'm never going to work again. So enjoy it. And I walked off stage and I was mortified. And the next day I got a phone call from my stage manager that was like, well, that was funny. And that was it. And I was like, oh man, like all the anguish and the stuff. And then so I brought my way of sort of apologizing to everybody was because it is as funny as it might be. You still like the show was not the way it was supposed to be that night. So I didn't want to be I wanted to acknowledge the idea that I didn't think it was okay. So I bought these enormous cookie cakes that I just put all over the theater in different departments that just said in blue icing, I'm sorry.
Oh, bless you.
Well, it's important. I think it's important to acknowledge the thing.
Last question. I want to ask, we talked about regional theatre. Big thing of why I wanted to do this was supporting local theatre in the UK, but not necessarily obviously because you are what I call the fantastic international artist. So why do you think local theatre is important, regardless of where you are in the world?
Oh, yeah. I'm happy to be a bit of an ambassador on this subject because I think I wouldn't be where I am without it. I don't think a lot of us would be. Nobody or very rarely people just start professionally. So you have to find a place. You have to a place to plant a seed. You don't just go and pluck flowers out of a store. You want to do it right. You find the base and you nurture it and you cultivate it. And I think the place to do that a lot of the time is local theater. And local theater gets a really bad rap because local theater sounds like amateur theater, and it's not. It's not. I've seen some of the best performances I've seen growing up, watching people that continued to inspire me in local theater that had more Broadway in them than some Broadway people that I've seen. So it's crazy to me why people think that they should cut funding to those things, because thinking creatively is what has gotten us some of the most wonderful things in the world. And I think, and I've said this before very recently because of current events, is that not to get too political, but like right now is the best time to be thinking creatively and outside of the box, because any other type of thinking seems to not be working. So I think that local theater, and especially theaters that are wonderful and open enough to cast almost everybody that auditions, and I know that a lot of them exist, is fantastic because you learn what theater really is about, and that is it is about a community. It is not about the show. The show is secondary. What it is about is forming a family and a community and doing something together and collaboratively. Theater is very rarely done alone. So where you learn that at the base level is when you're not getting paid for it, when you're having fun on your own, when you're making the friends you're going to make forever, and doing something that seems miraculous to everybody else but you. But really what you know the secret is you wouldn't be able to do it without everybody else. And that's the miracle.
And I couldn't think of a better way to end this amazing episode. Alex, do you know what? The response from everyone when we agreed to do this has been incredible. And that just goes to show from what a really nice guy that you are. So thank you so much for agreeing to do this.
Thank you for asking. I tell people all the time when I'm teaching class or I do stuff, I say, you know this better than anybody now. I'm around. You reach out. I hear you. If I can fit something into my schedule, I'm here. I'm happy to do it. I love talking about this. And this is such a cool show. And I will now be, a present viewer of the show and frequent commenter, I'm sure.
Brilliant.
But thank you. No, thank you, by the way. Don't thank me. Thank you for inviting me. I really appreciate it.
And this is now going to be on YouTube. This is the first episode that will be going up on YouTube. So you can relive it again. Please share it amongst everyone. Everyone watch it, share it. Let's see who else we can get on. But next week, if you are interested, we've got 3 guests who are from UK TV, from Kids TV, that are going to be on. So that's next week. But a massive thank you from Alex Brightman and from myself. We'll go to this you to finish on. It is a massive thank you and goodbye for now. Thank you.